Have you ever wondered what the best beer is to put coffee in? Well, don't worry, because I got you covered. I'm Sudsy Sam, I'm a professional brewer, and today I'm gonna be showing you how to make a Golden Milk Stout. Now, I believe that this is the perfect type of beer to be a vessel for coffee and showcase its nuances. So today, I'm gonna be showing you how the beer is made, the specific ingredients we used. I also put the recipe in the description below, and stick around to the end where we drink the beer together and I walk you through how it tastes. So, let's get to brewing.
All right, let's get started with the grain build. Now, this beer uses about 70% two-row as its base malt, with 15% malted oats, and then another 15% flaked oats. This is gonna give it a really nice body. Even though this beer is called a stout, it actually uses no dark malt, which is going to give it its golden appearance. So for the mashing, I aimed for about 153 degrees Fahrenheit. I used 4 parts calcium chloride to 1 part calcium sulfate, and I added a little bit of phosphoric acid to kind of just bring my pH into balance. Now, the 153 degrees Fahrenheit really is just to add a bit more of a body and sweetness to the beer. It's up to personal preference. We are going to be adding lactose later on, which will add a lot of sweetness to this beer. So I gave this beer about a 20-minute mash rest and then followed it up with a 20-minute Vorlauf. You can kind of see how many grains and particles come through with this beer. The oats also add a bit of haze, so I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any actual particles being sent over to the kettle. And once the beer looked kind of clear, I laudered over to the kettle to bring it to a boil and sparged along the way, making sure that I was getting the proper amount of volume. So once the beer gets close to a boil, it's time to add in the lactose. Now, I'm going to say that this is the single most important ingredient for this beer. It is a golden milk stout, so you have to have some sort of milk component into that, and that is the lactose. It is the milk sugar. It is unfermentable, so it's going to add a level of sweetness, creaminess, a nice mouthfeel, a bit of body to the beer that's going to persist all the way through fermentation. And it's going to work really well with coffee. It adds a level of flavor and sweetness that just amplifies the coffee while not covering it up. I boiled this beer for 90 minutes and then did a 60-minute bittering addition. I recommend using CTZ or Magnum and only aiming for about 25 IBUs, as a lot of the bitterness is going to come from that coffee. After the boil was over, I cooled down the wort to 68 degrees and sent it to my fermentation tank, oxygenating the wort along the way and finally pitching my yeast. So let's talk about fermentation a little bit. I'm using an English ale yeast strain from Fermentis called S04. It's gonna give me a bit more of a clean profile and a little bit of maltiness with not a whole lot of esters. I recommend any sort of English yeast strain for this beer. Also, I'm fermenting it at 68 degrees. Now, this is gonna allow it to slowly ferment and not produce a whole lot of esters as well, because I really only want a nice malty profile with not a lot of fruity notes to it. That way, everything else is just left to the coffee. I want the coffee to be the forefront of this beer. This took about 2.5 weeks to ferment. I started off at 18.5 Play-Doh and finished at around 7 Play-Doh. This is because I added lactose and I had a high mash temp, so it ended with a lot of unfermentable sugars and a high finishing gravity, which will translate to a good amount of sweetness left in the beer, which will hopefully showcase the coffee. Once the beer had been stable for a few days, I crashed it down to 32 degrees and proceeded with the next step, which was adding coffee. So here's how I recommend getting a good coffee flavor into your beer. You're going to use about half an ounce to an ounce per gallon of beer. You're going to put it whole bean into these hot mesh bags, and then you're going to steep your beer on top of it. Now, I personally used a keg. I siphoned some of the beer off of my fermentation tank, and then I let it sit warm for a day, or you can also do cold for 2 days, which I recommend a little more because you have less of a chance of over extraction. And that would mean that you get some sort of bell pepper flavor, a little extra acidity, or honestly just turning the beer into more coffee than beer at that point, which just will not taste good. After the coffee was done steeping, I removed the beer, pushed it back into my tank, clarified, carbonated, and that was it. It was ready to drink. I had gotten the flavors that I wanted, so I kegged it off and put it on tap. Just a small note, I used a mix of nitrogen and carbon dioxide for this beer because it adds a different kind of mouthfeel to it, but carbon dioxide works just as well, so use whatever you have available to you.
And here we have it, the finished product ready to drink. Now, I put this on Nitro, so it's got a good amount of head and some cascading bubbles going down, which adds a really nice kind of creamy mouthfeel on top of the lactose that has already been added to this Golden Milk Stout. You can kind of see right here, it's got a good golden color to it. It's not like a traditional stout where you put in a bunch of dark malts. It is really supposed to be very neutral in the maltiness. So let's have a taste. So it's got a touch of maltiness, but it's very subtle to the point where it's not really covering up any of the other roasty coffee flavors. And it's got a good backbone of sweetness to help showcase that coffee. Now, that's it for the beer. The coffee comes out in a completely different way. It's very nice and roasty initially, but it slowly gives way to very fruity notes. I get a lot of blueberry out of that. And that's gonna depend on your roast of coffee that you use in your beer. I personally used Klatch, which is a local roastery to me, and they ship all across the US. Another recommendation I have is Onyx, which also ships across the US, and they have some really good blends of coffee. So if you also have a recommendation, please leave a comment below. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe, it really helps the channel. I'm Sudsy Sam, don't forget to keep it sudsy, and I'll see you next time.